Hey guys, this is Tock with Tock Custom. Welcome back. We are going to keep going with this messenger bag tutorial. So in the last video we finished our inside lining for our messenger bag. We're going to join it with the outside of the bag right now, and then we're going to add buckles and finish polishing the whole bag so it's done. So we are going to finish this bag right now. So let's get started. So come on back to your table here, and we're going to start with the outside of the bag. The first thing I want to do is take the strap and tighten it so that it just kind of hugs around the bottom edge of the bag. If you have a fixed strap, that's fine too. So what I'm going to do is I usually take 3 pins and I'm going to pin down the strap so that it won't move while we're doing this. So I'll put one on each side and then one at the very bottom, just to keep the strap out of the way, because we need to make sure we don't sew through our strap. Alright, the next thing we need to do is grab our lining. So here is what we made for our inside lining. And you need to find the back. So you're going to lay this down. So this is my back panel. I have that welt pocket in the middle, and then I've got my pockets in the back section here. So I'm going to just put the whole outside of our bag inside of our lining. I'll try to do this on camera here. So you can just kind of feed it into the lining. And it should fit perfectly. So what we're looking for, once you get this in there, make sure the strap is all the way down, and then we're going to be pinning this edge right here. So these 2 pieces, so the front accent of your bag with the front of the lining. Okay, so I'm going to start by matching up these 2 front corner seams so they're touching each other. You want everything to be nice and even. And then I'm just going to pin these together. So you're going to see the outside lining panel, and then you're going to have your front accent, and it's going to go all the way through the foam and all that stuff. So I'm just going to take a second to pin this, and then I will show you what it looks like when we're ready. So now we have our lining pinned to the outside of our bag. So you want to start on this corner here. So we're going to do the gusset. We're going to stitch all the way across the front panels, and then we're going to finish by doing the other gusset. So we're going to do this on a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but if your panels don't meet up perfectly, you can do a little bit deeper of a seam allowance if you need to. So I might go to 5/8 or 3/4 of an inch if I have to. Okay, so if you can, I recommend taking off the arm of your sewing machine, and it's really easy if you can get it to go underneath the arm as you're doing this. We're just going to stitch all the way from the back right seam all the way around the front to the other side. Great, so we got that whole thing stitched. Now the next step is to trim this seam off. So I'm just going to use a pair of scissors and just kind of carefully cut most of the seam off. It doesn't have to be right on the stitches, but the closer you get the better, because we're going to end up turning this over and pressing it. Good, so now you should have your stitch looking good and trim your seam off. So now I'm going to flip this whole thing right side out. So I'm going to pull the outside of the bag out of the back, and then this lining, we're going to take it and shove it into the bag. So at first this is kind of tricky or weird looking. But you're going to find something that looks like this once you get it in there right. Now just make sure you take out your pins from where the strap was held down. So what we're going to do now is this seam right here that we just made, we're going to want to pull the lining in so that you can't see any of the lining on the outside. And we're going to take this over to our ironing board, and we're going to press this whole seam down so it's hiding all of the lining on the inside of the bag. So do your best to press it, and I'll show you a little trick that I use to make it a little easier. Right, so to iron this in place, I like to just kind of grab the front right gusset and just kind of tuck the lining in there, and I'm going to put it right on the edge of my ironing board and just hit this side first. So that's going to start us off with a nice press side there. Okay. So then I usually just take the whole bag and put it all the way over the heel of my ironing board. Just kind of roll the lining on the inside so that you can't see it on the outside. And then just carefully press it into place. Okay, then once you get all the way across, do the same thing with the other side. Okay, perfect. So we've got this edge nice and pressed over, so this all looks nice and straight. So we're just going to take this over to our top stitching station, and we're going to top stitch what we just pressed from right here, where we started that stitch before, all the way around all three of these panels in the front, and this is going to lock everything in place so that it stays nice and flat. Awesome, so we have our top stitch all the way across the top here. That looks very good. Our next step is to top stitch this top flap, but before we can do that, we need to press some things into shape. Alright, so over on my ironing board, I'm just going to lay this down so that it's going kind of the long way. What I want to do is just make sure that the lining all looks good on the flap and that there's no wrinkles or anything in it. And I'm going to press it towards the inside of the bag so that any excess fabric goes towards the inside of the bag. If you kind of lift up your lining a little bit on the top side and you look at the bottom back lining, you can you want the flap lining to go underneath, so you should see just the flap lining and then this batting in here. And then we're going to take the back panel and we're going to kind of curl this edge just about an inch over so all the raw edges are hidden on the inside. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that's all nice and flat, so when you look at that you shouldn't see any raw edges. Then I'm going to take my iron and just iron this all down, and it's going to give a nice crease to that back panel and hide everything there. And if you kind of iron it, it'll stay in place for a moment. So that's what we're looking for right there. You should see just a nice clean edge all the way across this lining, because we're going to end up hand stitching this later, but we want this to look the way that we need it to now before we top stitch the flap. So before I even move this, I'm going to take some pins and I'm going to pin through all the layers so that this lining doesn't move at all. Oops. Put a pin about 1.5 inches from each edge, because we need to do some stitching right here. Perfect. So let's bring it back to the table and then I'll show you how we're going to top stitch it. Okay, good. So when you bring it back, you should see how your lining is going to look on the inside. And we got that pinned in place. So now I'm going to turn the flap the way it needs to be and kind of make sure everything looks straight. You can kind of adjust it before we do this. So we're going to be doing this top stitch all the way around this curl. Now this one's a really important stitch because this is what everyone's going to see. So when we start, I'm going to bring this over to my top stitching station, and I'll show you guys how I do this too. But I'm going to start about 1 inch under here, and I'm going to stitch all the way up around the curve, all the way around this curve and back about an inch or so lower. And why we go an inch or so lower here is so that on the inside, your bobbin thread is going to lock the lining in place where we ironed it just there. So having those points anchored is really helpful so that you don't have to worry about doing it by hand. Then we just have to do a hand stitch across. We'll get to that later. So I'm going to show you how I do my top stitch across this top flap right now. And we're going to make it really easy. Okay, so I am all set up for top stitching, and I'm going to position the left side of my flap about an inch under where the gusset ends, and we're going to stitch all the way around. So I'll try to go slow. Now when you get to the curve, it's best to try to do the whole stitch in one stitch without stopping at all. If you stop, sometimes the stitch will move or the needle will move. So try to do the whole thing in one fluid motion. So I just kind of turn the whole bag at a nice steady pace. But then once you get all the way through the curve, you can stop and adjust if you need to. So I'm going to keep going. And then when you finish, make sure you go about an inch past where it ends if you can. Alright, our top stitching is all done, so that looks very good. The inside should look pretty good on the inside flap. That's cool. And we can see that those back stitches are holding down the corners of our inside lining, so that's going to make it easier later. So now we're going to attach buckles to our bag. So I'm going to show you how to make your own straps and then use some parachute buckles to make 2 buckles for the front of your messenger bag. Alright, so to make a set of straps for our buckles, I always do this the same way. I cut a piece of fabric that's exactly 3 inches wide by about 20 inches. The length doesn't really matter too much, but it needs to be exactly 3 inches wide. And since this ruler is 3 inches wide, I can just put it right on the edge, and it's going to give me a nice piece of fabric that's exactly 3 inches wide. So bring your piece of fabric over to your ironing board. Now this should be about 3 by 20 inches. And all you have to do is make sure you fold it in half so that the right side is on the outside. And I'm going to press this in half all the way down. And the goal of what we're trying to do is make this a 1-inch strap, because we have 1-inch parachute buckles. So after we do that, I'm going to fold over each end about 1/2 inch and press it all the way down on both sides. Okay. And then after we got that pressed, you're going to fold the whole thing in half so that the edges come together. And this should all press nice and straight. So now we have a pressed 1-inch strap where all the raw edges are on the inside, and we're just going to go and top stitch the outer edge first with the yellow, and then we're going to top stitch the other side, and we're going to have a nice clean 1-inch strap for our buckles. Alright, so I am going to just top stitch this kind of like we did with the other strap, but smaller. And actually, I'm going to press this before I do the other side so it stays nice and flat. So here's what you need to do your buckles. So we just made our strap, and I've got 2 parachute clips here. So right now we just need the bottom parts. So I'm going to just make sure that this fits in here, and it is exactly 1 inch, which is perfect. So what I want to do is just get about 1.5 inches on each side, and then I'm just going to cut this. So this doesn't take a whole lot for the bottom parts. So now we have about 3 inches of strap here, and we need 2 of these for both of our bottom buckles. So we will cut 2 of those. And right now we're just going to do the bottom parts. So to fit our bottom buckles, the first part we need to do is just slide in your straps so that the top stitching is showing on the outside. And then I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and just stitch these ends closed so that they won't move. Now we have to measure out where we want our bottom buckles to go. So get your bag and lay it nice and flat, and I'm just going to grab a ruler, and I usually measure about 3 inches from this edge on each side, so here and here. So if I put my ruler right up against that edge before it starts to curve and measure down 3 inches, this time I'll do about 3.5. I'm just going to mark that with chalk right on the bottom red part of the bag there. This way it'll be right in the center of my embroidery here, and I would like the other one to be right in the center of the embroidery here. So that's about 3.5 inches again, so in this case I can just come right down below the embroidery. So if this is nice and flat, that's how the buckles are going to look. So now I've got my 2 marks of where my bottom buckles are going to go. So I've got these 2 guys, and they're going to end up looking kind of like this. So getting to this point is a little tricky, and I'll show you how to do it. Right, so to get these buckles in the bag where we want them, we have to open it up and pull out all the pins. What we need to do is, you can either do this from the inside of the bag or the outside, but you need to reach between the lining all the way under and kind of pull the lining up a little bit. And I'm going to try to spread this seam apart so I can see a little bit of white stitches there. And I'm going to take my seam ripper and just pop out a couple of stitches. You can also go through the lining of the bag to pop out a few stitches. So once you do a couple, you should be able to get your finger kind of to come out of the seam a little bit there. So you just need it to be 1 inch wide. Okay, just like that. So I got a little hole there between the seam. And I'm going to take my buckle, and we're just going to slide it so it's right side up, right in the hole that we just created. That just slides in there. I'm grabbing it from the inside so I can pull it inside. And I'll try to hold this up so you can see, but that's hard to do. So it's going to look like that. Okay, so the buckle will be able to move. If you need to pull it out a little bit, you don't want it to be too tight, otherwise the buckle won't move. So I'm going to grab the whole seam on the inside, and I'll turn this right side out so you can see what I'm doing. So what we've got here is the tab from the bottom buckle that we just put in through the outside. So what we're looking to do is just stitch over where the stitches were that we just pulled out, and this is going to lock this into place. Okay, that's locked in place. So now I'm just going to take some scissors and trim off that little tab. And that is nice and flat now. So we'll do this to the other side, and then we'll pull it out and bring it back to the table. Now we need to get ready for our top buckles. So what I usually do is take what's left of our strap that we made. I'm going to fold it in half so I can cut this exactly in half. And this should be more than enough for what we need. So I'm just going to cut these in half so I have 2 equal pieces. Okay, so now to do our top buckles, you're going to need one of your top straps. And I'm going to fit this through here. And I'm going to come up about 2.5 or 3 inches on the back side. And then I'm going to fold this over. So it's going to look kind of like that. You might find that this is a little too much slack, so I'm going to trim this so it just hangs about 1 inch or so over the edge. So we're looking for something like this. And this is what we're going to put on our flap. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so we have our top buckle with the strap laid out the way we want it. So that's how I want it to look. I'm going to put it right into the bottom buckle. And then I'm going to put the flap exactly where I want it to be. And I'm just going to lay it right on the flap exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to take one pin, put it all the way through all the layers of the flap and pull it out. And this should lock it in. Now when we stitch it, this is exactly how it's going to look when it's done. So get this exactly perfect. Sometimes it's a little off and you can straighten it up. So I'm going to do this to both sides, and then we're going to get ready to box stitch these. Alright, so these are all fitted and ready for sewing. We're going to do 2 box stitches on these straps the same way we did them on the sides. If you missed that, please go back to the second video in the series to see how we do a box stitch. Okay, so we're all done with the buckles. Here's a close-up on how it looks. So we've got a nice attachment on the bottom here that's hidden in the seam, and then we've got a nice box stitch on the top part, so that all came out really well. On the bottom, we did a black bobbin thread so it would blend in a little bit better. You can use blue if you want, or whatever color. Okay, and the bag is almost done. There's only one thing left to do with this bag. So we have to re-pin all this lining stuff back together. So this actually held its shape, so I can just re-pin this without having to iron it, which is good. So I'm going to re-pin this real quick, and then I'm going to show you the last thing we need to do for these bags. Now we've got all of our lining pinned in place, and I'll show you how I do my hand stitching on the inside so that you don't see any of the stitches on the outside of the bag when it's done. Now, what you need for this part is a hand sewing needle, and I'm just going to use some dark blue thread. So make sure you have a lot of extra thread cut out because we're going to double this up. So I'm going to get a nice long piece of string here. And then we're going to double this up and knot it at the back. The way I do a knot on the back of my thread is I just take the 2 gathered up pieces of thread here, if you can see it, and I wrap it around my finger twice, and then I just kind of roll it off and then pull it tight, and it's going to make a knot at the back, which you can kind of see right there. And if I get a little extra thread on the back, I'll just snip that off so it doesn't look bad. Okay, so once you have your knot, I usually take my needle and I try to stick it inside the lining so that my knot at the end of the thread gets hidden on the inside of the bag. So I'm going to pull that all the way out so that the knot goes in that little piece of lining there. And then I'm going to try to zoom in real close. So what we're looking to do is we're going to try to do a hidden or a blind stitch. And this does take a long time, so this would be a good time to sit and watch a TV show. I'm just going to grab a little bit of fabric and come out and then just try to grab a little bit of this blue fabric. In the first couple of stitches, you just want it to kind of close up a little bit of that seam. And once we get into the middle of the fabric, you have to be a little bit more careful about how this all comes together. So I'm just going to keep grabbing a little bit of red and a little bit of blue, not a whole lot. Thankfully, our blue thread is going to hide a lot of this. There we go. Okay. So we've got this stitch down from the top stitching, which is nice. So now that I'm on the lining, right where this comes out of here, I'm going to try to put my pin as close as I can to the lining and just go about a 1/4 inch at the most and just pick up a little bit of the lining on the left every stitch. So right where it comes out, right here, I'm going to go back in on the other side. And then just kind of barely cross over and come out on the top lining side. So if you can keep doing this all the way down, it's going to hide all of your thread. And it's going to make this a nice flush seam that you can't see on the outside. So be careful not to put your needle all the way through all the layers. You're really just trying to pick up a couple of threads worth of fabric on the right side, and then a couple of threads worth on the left side. Pull it through, make sure each stitch is nice and flat. You don't have to pull the thread too hard, because if you pull it, sometimes the thread will break and then you gotta fix it. So just very carefully in the right side, out the left side, and if you do it right, it's going to hide all of your stitches between the fabric so that you can't see it at all. So I'm going to finish this up and come back and show you what it looks like when it's done. And then when you get to your pins, you can just take them out and put them away, and then just keep going. The pins help everything stay nice and flat, so that you can keep stitching without worrying about things moving. Okay, so now I'm going to finish this up, and I'll come back when I'm done and let you know how it looks. Okay, and we are all done. So here's the outside of the bag. I cleaned up all my embroideries. Everything is looking really good. The inside, as you can see, the lining is all nice and flat and attached, so this thing is good to go and ready for use right now. I also cleaned up some of the loose threads on the corners and stuff like that, so now I just have to lint roll it and press it, and this thing is good to go. Alright guys, we're all done. We have our custom-made Wonder Woman messenger bag. I had a lot of fun making this video. Hopefully this helps some of you complete your own messenger bags, and I hope to come out with some new tutorial videos soon. I'll be going to TwitchCon this weekend, so hopefully I will be doing some new stuff as soon as I get back. But thanks a lot for watching this, and I will see you guys on the next video.